I first moved into Oxford House coming fresh out of a treatment center in 1996. And I very quickly fell in love with the Oxford House model, got involved, became every house officer, every chapter officer position, became the very first North Carolina State Association chair. I did a lot and I immersed myself into the Oxford House model and the Oxford House concept and the Oxford House culture. I didn't sit on the sidelines, and it wasn't a game to me. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, I had a couple returns to use. I hadn't finished my experimentation out there in those streets. Thankfully, God still had his hand on me, and I was able to make my way back. And when I came home from prison in 2004, and I began to explain to Kathleen Gibson what my incarceration experience was like, and the fact of not being able to make any sort of preparation on my own behalf in anticipation of my release date, we came up with the concept of, wouldn't it be awesome to have somebody out here on the street working on behalf of the incarcerated person to help connect them with an Oxford House? How about that? All of a sudden, I became, to my knowledge, the very first paid reentry coordinator for Oxford Houses. I say paid because reentry was already happening big time way across the nation in Seattle, Washington, with our dear, dear brother, Tony Perkins, and everybody involved with him. God rest Tony's soul. And so what I did was I took everything that Tony had created, and I plagiarized it and took Washington's name off the top and put North Carolina on it, and we rock. Yeah. And so, you know, I think back to when that reentry coordinator position first started, and now I look around, and just in North Carolina alone, I believe there's something like 5, maybe even 7 reentry coordinators in the state of North Carolina. Is that right, Barbara? 6 reentry coordinators. That tells you how many people it takes to be one Curtis, right? Y'all could have laughed a little harder at that. I thought it was funny. But the reality is that there are men and women on prison bunks right now who need our help. Men and women just like you and I, who've burned every bridge, don't have anybody to call collect, they're getting no mail. The only way they're going to have a chance is if you and I work on their behalf and reach inside to help them make their way outside. So I'm excited to moderate this panel. You know, I moved on from reentry coordinator, was also outreach, opened up only God knows how many houses. I left Oxford House in 2017 and became the executive director of the Alcohol Drug Council of North Carolina. I learned a lot in that role. Hopefully I made an impact by God's grace and mercy. In January of 2023, I accepted the role of executive director of what's called the Bob Barker Foundation. And so now it is literally my job to help give money away all over the United States to nonprofit organizations that are working to do reentry work and reduce recidivism. Not only that, but I'm also the newest member of the Oxford House Incorporated Board of Directors. Yeah. Both humbled and honored and overwhelmed with gratitude. Only God. Only God. Over 75% of Oxford House residents have a history of jail or prison time. In the United States, around 60% of correctional facilities residents struggle with substance addiction. Many released I hate this terminology. Many released individuals end up re-offending and returning to incarceration within a year. However, choosing to join an Oxford House after incarceration often leads to lasting recovery and reduced criminal behavior. Some states partner with Oxford House for reentry, recommended by drug courts or parole officers for positive outcomes. This curbs recidivism, saves costs, and promotes recovery. Entering an Oxford House from incarceration introduces participatory democracy instead of institutional authority. Residents can hold leadership roles, gaining valuable real-life skills. During this panel discussion, several key topics will be explored: the necessity for post-incarceration recovery opportunities, practical approaches to facilitating the transition of individuals leaving incarceration into an Oxford House, how Oxford Houses can support drug court clients in achieving long-term recovery and meeting the expectations of drug courts, and how living in an Oxford House fosters the transition to long-term, crime-free recovery from the majority of residents. The panelists, who are all experts in the field, will share their experiences and insights on these critical issues. Our first panelist today is Mr. Dan Hahn. A whole bunch of Chiefs fans in here, whatever.
Let's go.
Daniel Hahn is a regional manager for Oxford House Incorporated. He has been in long-term recovery since July 2007. He has worked with Oxford House since 2008. He has an extensive background with Oxford House, with 3.5 years as a resident, 1.5 years as alumni, and 10 years as an employee. Mr. Hahn is an Oxford House World Council alumnus and the Oxford House 2016 Reggie Midget Award winner for spreading the movement into new areas. As an outreach worker for Oklahoma from 2013 to 2020, Mr. Hahn supervised staff, opened Oxford Houses, and worked closely with professionals in substance use disorder and individuals new to recovery. In 2020, Dan was promoted to regional manager, where he now works with professionals and staff in multiple states in order to expand and support the existing network of Oxford Houses. Mr. Hahn's passion is helping the incarcerated, as he has worked to help transition the formerly incarcerated with substance use disorder into Oxford House. And I'm honored to call this gentleman my dear friend. Help me welcome Mr. Dan Hahn.
Is this you?
Yep.
Well, I got 3 minutes, so I can still say good morning, everybody. My name is Dan. I'm a person in long-term recovery. What that means for me is I haven't chosen to use a drink or a drug since July 18th of 2007. So I'm gonna just start where my passion for reentry came from, and it didn't get involved into Oxford House until where I was able to use that passion for 6 or 7 years. But I grew up in the state of Kansas, was born there. And that's still home. Kansas Department of Correction number 77005. When I was in prison in 2001, I had a really good, I knew a lot of friends there, so I never had to work in the kitchen. I had a really good job on the maintenance crew, and I got to spend a lot of time working on the softball diamonds and doing stuff that would take my mind off of being in prison. But every night I'd walk the track, and I would think about how when I got out, I'm gonna do this, and this, and had this really good plan. I had a really good plan of what I was gonna do. What I didn't realize, and Kansas has changed a lot, and so have all states, because there's been a little more focus on it, but they weren't very picky about where I went to go home, and I didn't have any family other than the wrong type of family. So when I was released in July of 01, or no, actually September of 01, I went right back to where I came from. I remember the first night I got out, I went and saw someone I shouldn't be around, And within a couple of hours, I was sitting outside of a bar waiting on somebody to come bring me some money, and he wouldn't come out of the bar, and he wasn't coming outside, and I was sitting there going, my God, I'm already back in the grease. You know, within 12 hours, I was right back doing the same things. And I managed to try, in and out of jail. I've done 34 months of my life locked up in various sections, and stumbled into, actually, I got arrested my final time July 18th of 2007, which is my clean date in Joplin, Missouri. And I ended up in a virtually a homeless shelter. And I was waiting to do an interstate compact back to Kansas. And I ran into a guy at a recovery meeting, and he mentioned the word Oxford House. And it's weird because I think in our old videos or something that I've heard this before on video with Oxford House. The first thing that came out of my mouth is I said, who runs it? And he said, well, nobody does. We rent the place. And I'm like, what? And I tried to move in, but they didn't have any openings, and it was the only house in the area. And it was a really remarkable experience. And God is good, because just a couple of years ago, I worked with, we now have a contract there for outreach, and I was able to open a version 2 of that house that had been open. It was the 325th house that had ever existed, and it's living on to this day, and I got to be a small part of helping make that happen. So God is really good, and that's where I heard about Oxford House. But I fast forward, I finally got my interstate compact, and I was going back to Wichita, Kansas, and I was scared of who I'd run into. I had 8 months of sobriety, and in April of 2008, I stumbled into the College Hill Oxford House. And immediately on moving in, I hadn't been there very long. We had a housing services meeting, and I asked a gentleman that's one of my mentors out in the front yard, I asked him, I'd really like to help get people out of prison. And it was based on that time around the track and what happened that first day out, because I really believed, and I still believe it to this day with my whole heart, that if I would have had the opportunities that we work so hard to provide today, my clean date would be back several years. I believe that with all my heart. And that's motivated, I try to show that energy in the things we do to how we can individually help people find the path that we see so many people helping today. So my reentry story is not coming through a reentry program, but I did see the need for it and have been a big part of it. One of the things what I really want to talk about today is that how the individual themselves can make a difference. It's not the outreach worker's job. They are there to facilitate, but the individual members and the houses and what they provide at that level is the success to reentry. Once I was employed, I was so excited, but I'll back up. When I was in Wichita, we like Curtis said, I have a copy of the first reentry app that Kansas ever accepted, a blank application, and at the top of it, Washington State is marked out, and it says Kansas, and the guy's name was Jared. I have a copy of that application, and he lived with me at the Braeburn Oxford House. And so becoming an employee in 2013, I took my love for that and had the ability to teach and inspire people to get involved. And I don't stand up here today to tell you how to do it, because it's different everywhere. And what I've learned over the years that, all it takes is a change in a sentencing law, and that's going to, a release plan, and that's going to affect our ability, how we accept them and how we do it. I'm not going to talk about that today. What I am going to talk about is the difference the individual can make. When something that I've learned over the years and see it time and time again, we're scared. Now, we don't show it as men, and I've seen and women the same way as humans. We don't show it, but when we get out, we're scared. I always tell the outreach workers I work with, or when I'm speaking with folks in reentry houses, that the best thing that we can do is communicate. And I call it getting the gremlins off you, because when you get out, you're just so not used to being free, and going into a Walmart scary. And so what I really, my passion for that is communication. Setting people down and letting them know what they're a part of. And they're a part of this. Look at you guys. And that's but understanding what they're involved in and what it is, and having individual conversations with the people that are coming from incarceration. I like to sit down with new members, and that's what they are. And we don't have reentry houses, we have Oxford houses. We talk, they're coming into an Oxford house, and those things that have gone on in the past, you know, that's a quick time of transition. Those of us that have been locked up know the code. Business stays to ourselves. We're not a part of, what you're doing is not my problem. We stick to ourselves and we have a code of silence. When you come to an Oxford house, if we do not have conversations with folks about you are here for a new way to live, okay? And what it is finding and keeping and maintaining long-term sobriety. That is the focus. And explaining to folks what we are and how we work, and that it's gonna be okay. Going into a new member's room coming from incarceration and seeing the exact centimeter amounts between their two soapbox and their, and explaining to them that it's gonna be okay, and getting them involved. And our primary purpose, it is the most awesome opportunity. When we open our Oxford House manual, it says right in there, Tradition 1. What is Tradition 1? The provision of housing and rehabilitative support for the addict and alcoholic that wants to stop and stay stopped. And that has to be our focus when we're working with these folks. I like to take from my friend Curtis as something that he taught me a long time ago, and I did not follow that path because it was before I met him. Curtis always said, go to the top. Go to the top. When you're trying to get out and work with your local area about reentry or your state, go to the top. And I wish I would have known that. But as a member, before I was an employee, and then even as an employee, one of the most critical things that I can point out where I've seen areas succeed is building relationships with the probation and parole officers that are more than just, hey, we have a bed, send them over for an interview. Working with them on, are they a good fit? Maybe their age, help them place them in the right spot. Not being sometimes we have houses full of younger members, and you have some, whatever we can do to make them the most comfortable, putting them in an environment to succeed. All of us that have carried drugs in our pocket were felons, whether, we may not have got caught or not, but, we got caught. So trying to, releasing the stigma, we're all addicts and alcoholics, and we're all fighting for the same goal, which is to stop and stay stopped. So communication is really the key. That's the big thing that I've found, and it's with the individual. The strength of our houses directly correlates with our success rate. I always say that what we want is the example in the house that recovery is possible. It's just that simple. Going to meetings, fellowshipping, whatever recovery program, whatever pathway that the members are choosing, we obviously have no pathway or we wouldn't be there. So getting the right example and plugging people into recovery is the goal. I will tell you a little bit about the successes that I've seen in Oklahoma. We have houses that are entirely comprised, numerous houses across the state that are entirely comprised of people in post-incarceration, recently out. And they do extremely well. But the key to that is it's not where we came from, it's why we're there. Why are we here? And we're there for recovery. We're not there for housing. And sometimes, and I'm sure maybe one of our next speakers will talk about it. I'll go ahead and mention it briefly. A lot of times prisons are just centered on getting people off their caseload. So it's important for us to review the things that I just said. We're here for recovery. We're not here to provide housing till the next move. We're here to stop and stay stopped. But working with your local offices, finding what works best, because what is the goal? To give as many people as we can an opportunity at an Oxford House bed as possible. So doing it yourself, the individual, and yes, there are somewhat programs that Outreach help put in place, systems to help get people in, but become a part of that. I know in Oklahoma and in other states, there's reentry committees where the members are doing things, putting together hygiene packs, putting together bus passes, resources, things like that to help people coming out. And Oxford House has that capability. what a wonderful concept to have chapters, to have state associations, to have committees, fundraising, whatever, reentry committees, and use those tools to help facilitate that new person coming out of incarceration and give them the best possible chance. Reentry is no different than somebody showing up to the door for an interview. Do you want to stop and stay stopped? That's all I have. Thank you all very much.
Another hand for Mr. Dan Hahn. Our next panelist, Mr. Jesse Wilson. Mr. Jesse Wilson moved into his first Oxford house on April 21st of 2017, 5 weeks after he was released from prison. He has been an employee of Oxford House since December 1st of 2018. He credits his long-term recovery to Oxford House, Alcoholics Anonymous, and most importantly, to God. Today, he is a proud father, a son, a brother, and a trustworthy friend. Help me welcome Mr. Jesse Wilson.
Good morning, family. God never ceases to amaze me. Look at this. We all got a chance, and that's why we're here. My name is Jesse Wilson. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and what that means to me is I have not gave myself permission or found the excuse to drink or use drugs since January 21st of 2018. I found Oxford House only because God intervened into my life and pointed me right in the direction of Oxford House. And that's the truth. I came into an Oxford House a very angry, prison mentality. I had a heart full of hatred. I was a broken person. I was a grown child that never had a chance to live. Okay? I come into a house that was full of recovery, and I went to a lot of meetings. I got a sponsor. Well, he told me he was going to be my sponsor, and I didn't like that. He told me that I was going to either work the steps or I was going to drink and die, and I said, I'm done with this guy. You notice that my sobriety date isn't the date that I moved into that Oxford House. I went to a lot of meetings, heard a lot of good stuff, and I said 3 words that we should never say: I got this. The day after I got off parole, I moved out and I got drunk, and I got high on other things. And when I called that house back, they said they was full. And my exact words was, I don't care if I have to put a mattress in the corner in the floor. If I don't come back, I will die. And you know what I done? They let me come back, and I put a mattress in the corner in the floor, and they let me come back. They let me come back with alcohol on my breath because they loved me. The best thing we can give anyone in this world is hope. And the one thing that doesn't run out of style is kindness. I lead a team of very passionate, hard-working reentry coordinators in North Carolina, and I'm talking about long hours, late nights, and we really care about the returning person that's coming into Oxford House. As I was sitting here waiting on this panel to start, I seen 4 or 5 men that I interviewed in prison that is here today, so please give them a hand. We never know when we're going to be the first voice or face of recovery somebody sees. So it is very important that we make sure we're practicing spiritual principles. If I talk about God, if I talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, and you know I'm going to talk about Oxford House, just know that that is what saved my life, and that's what I love, and that's what I'm passionate about. So please bear with me. We also do a lot of outreach, but let me talk about inreach, going into the prisons, going into the jails. Because let me tell you, that's where a lot of the sick and suffering are, ladies and gentlemen. And when we go in, as a team, we went into about 15 correctional facilities in North Carolina, and we've spoke over 300 men and women this year alone. And the amount of applications that we get it takes each one of us to work hard. There's been 365 secured home plans just last year alone in the state of North Carolina. I want to open your minds to know that let's never forget where we came from. How many people here has been to prison? How many people used or drank alcohol the day they got out of prison? Yeah, which time, right? A case manager looked me in the eyes and he said, "You're going to have to go back to where you came from." And I said, "If I go back, I know what's going to happen." And he said, "There are no options for you, Mr. Wilson." So you see why I work late nights, long days. It's for the people that's still behind them walls and fences that need us. And I'm very passionate. My fire burns bright for folks in prison because I've been there. I'm looking at Joshua Crosby, and he never spoke to anyone in recovery, never have found recovery in his life. And when I spoke to him, he said, "All I need is a chance. All I need is a chance." Each one of us came because we got a chance today. And how we treat people once they come into an Oxford house is very important. If I would have come into an Oxford house where they did not show me love, I would have said they was treating me better at the dope house. If I walked into an AA meeting and nobody shook my hand and smiled and said, "I'm glad you're here," I probably wouldn't go back to another AA meeting, would I? None of us is still here it's because we found somebody and we stuck close to somebody that has what we wanted. Can everybody nod your head? I still keep people like that in my life that has what I want. Not the car, not the house, in here, spiritually. Let's all try to go back to our Oxford houses and be that for the newcomer. When you do that, you will begin to change lives and save lives, because that's what we are here to do, period. I'm sure many of us sitting in here, if you was to look at our criminal record and judge us, we probably wouldn't have been voted into an Oxford house. I tell you, the people that looked real bad on paper was the ones that's still sitting here today. Mr. Mike McGuirt, he's a reentry coordinator. He works with me. Whenever I interviewed this man, and I'm going to throw him all the way under the bus, he done about 12 years, and he had 78 infractions, and many of them was violent. And he was a part of something in there that he didn't want to be a part of anymore. And guess what? He works for us today. When we interview somebody on the phone or in person, what do we hear? We hear intentions. Well, let me tell you something about intentions. That's all they are until we put action behind them. So we can take a person as what they tell us, but guess what? We're going to give you two things if you come in this Oxford house: a chance, and we're going to give you rope. You either run with that, or you find yourself at the end of it and you're going to be voted out. And that's the way the model works. How many people in here today has been voted out of a house? Raise your hand. Be honest. It's okay. You're here now. So even if we vote them in or her in and we show this person love, we get them to meetings, okay, and something happens and they go. We never dismiss anyone without a cause, correct? The hands that I've seen is because the seed of recovery was planted. See, we place so many people now that we're able to follow up in North Carolina and see who stays, because that's important. And they're called 90-day follow-ups. Well, I got to look and I said, well, how many people has stayed 90 days? And 25% of people stayed 90 days. And I'm thinking, well, what are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong? Where's the other 75% at? And it's not about that. It's about planting that seed in that 75%, because this is a golden opportunity. Oxford House Recovery, Living Life, is a golden opportunity because we didn't know what life was before we came. We didn't. See, I use drugs and alcohol to change the way I feel. I stay in recovery to continue to change who I am. And it's about changing who I am. And to change who you are, you got to start doing some things you've never done. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness is the essentials to recovery. Of course, it takes 80% of a vote to vote someone out, or any other, to vote someone in. My fault. 80% of the vote to vote someone in, the majority to vote all other votes. It's for a reason. So if somebody's being honest and you hear something, and look for something in an interview, and it's called the gift of desperation, because that's what I had when I came in, and that's what a lot of these men that I interview have. I look for that desperation to change their lives. But I also always let that man know what he's walking into. But going in and going back to these prisons, and my primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. It doesn't say some alcoholics. It doesn't say the people from the treatment centers. It says all. Okay? Now, I've had houses tell me in North Carolina, well, we've accepted 3 people from prison. They didn't work out. I think we're good. I said, what if y'all done that with the people in treatment centers? You know, oh, the last 5 from the treatment centers didn't work out. We're not going to take applications from treatment. I guess you'd have some empty houses, wouldn't you? Yeah. This is about change and action. And how can we help the new man or woman come in from prison? Because these folks are broken. These folks are still wearing state clothes. I came into an Oxford house with a pair of sandals. They wasn't from jail, but a pair of state boots. And these guys loved me long enough until I learned how to love myself. See, willingness is a door open from the inside, and only I stand inside. So how do we show another person, if you want what we have, you got to do what we do? Okay? So there is stigma around people in prison. There's stigma around everybody in this room. We should be stigma breakers and not stigma makers, okay? Period. That man or that woman is my sister or brother that's still behind them fences. Okay? So how can we equip ourselves to be ready for someone coming from prison or anywhere? Well, as members of houses, as members of houses, we need to tap into the local resources. We want to help the newcomer that doesn't have no clothes, doesn't have no food. You know, so the professional world calls it social determinants of health, but the basic needs of a human being that's just coming into Oxford House. How many people here had their move-in fee and their first week EES when they moved in? Wow. But most didn't, correct? Who are we to say, you got to have money to come into our house? Who are you to say that? Who are you to look down and say, oh, he's just getting out of jail for the 30th time? Who are you to say this person's relapsed out of a house twice? You know, who are we to say that? We can't look down on nobody. That's what society has done for us forever, and it's our job to change that. And the people in this room can change the world. So I try to open minds, because without the chance, how are we going to know somebody's going to make it? We're going to bring them in, we're going to show them some love, and we're going to hold their ass accountable. Period. Oxford House continues to save my life daily. And if you're helping in your community, in your recovery community, help men and women come from prison, I applaud you this afternoon, I think. But I want you guys to know that we are working hard to help men and women come from prison. And people that come from prison seem to be more grateful and driven for a chance. And I will say that. Thank y'all for letting me talk. Have a good convention.
Give it up for Jesse Wilson, y'all. It is now my honor to introduce you to Miss Julie Moriarty. Julie Moriarty is the chapter chair for Chapter 19 from, what is that, Houma, Louisiana. She was released directly from prison into Oxford House. Brian, help me welcome Julie Moriarty.
Okay, first of all, okay, now that that's out of the way, My name is Julie, and I'm an addict who absolutely rejoices in her recovery. And I want to express my gratitude as someone who once believed she was nothing, to be a part of something so big and so beautiful, and to be around so many like-minded individuals. Yeah, okay, so I was incarcerated many times, and I always had this idea that, of course, I wanted a better life. Of course, I wanted to be clean and sober, but I did not know how to put it into action. So I went through that for a while, and I'll never forget the last time I got arrested, I just gave the police officer my drugs. I was so miserable and so tired of suffering that I knew that there had to be a better way. So it was kind of like an epiphany for me. While I was incarcerated, I thought about myself, and I thought about how to live differently. I had to do things differently. I couldn't keep just getting out and like relying on my own will and that like kind of halfway determination that I had. So I had heard Oxford like sprinkled throughout my addiction. So I got on the phone and I called people and said, I have to do something differently. I can't keep living like this. And somebody told me about Oxford, and they set up an interview for me. I took the interview, and when they told me I was accepted, I cried, because I knew in that moment, that was the beginning of the rest of my life. That was the moment when I can become like the person that I'm really meant to be. Yeah, thank you. So I got out, and I went directly to the Oxford House. Like, I did not want to take not one single chance of running into anybody or being tempted. I walked through those doors, and I just waited for somebody to tell me what to do. Because I had been a slave either to the justice system or to my addiction for so long that I didn't even know who I was. I didn't know the next steps to take. And in that Oxford House, I was welcomed with these people who knew exactly where I had been. And to me, that was one of the most important things. They knew that I needed guidance. They knew that I needed support. And I utilized that greatly. Oxford, for me, gave me that sense of community, because the opposite of addiction is connection. And I think that's why Oxford is so successful. We have an 87% success rate for people that stay over a year and a half. And that's amazing. Yeah. Okay, so working with parole, I believe that parole officers like hearing the words Oxford House, because they know that we're getting that support system and everything that we need to recover. I do my best to apply the spiritual principles to all aspects of my life. So I was very open with my parole officer. If I needed help, I told her. She was able to rely on, me being drug tested and everything. As far as the reentry is concerned, I just did my best to keep trying to do the next best thing. I got involved with Oxford. I eventually became the chapter chair. I knew that holding other people accountable would help me hold myself accountable. So I really put everything I am into that. There was a security that was beautiful that I found in Oxford House, and that was the knowledge that I could be there, that I would not get kicked out as long as I did what I was supposed to do, as long as I worked a program and I paid my EES. And coming from someone that was homeless, that security really gave me a strong foundation on which to build upon. So that's pretty much all I got, y'all, and I really, really appreciate all of y'all, and I'm grateful to be a part of this. Thank you.
Julie Moriarty. That's pretty much all she got. I say that's a whole lot. You know, it's interesting to me. I was just sitting here listening to everybody and thinking about how each one of us were once like on the street, literally, doing our thing. Could have been killed, probably should have been killed. Each one of us had to go to an Oxford House interview, nervous and not knowing what to expect and hoping and praying to God that these people accept me into this house, because I don't know what I'm going to do if they don't. And then just look at what God can do. Look at what God can do and is doing with us. And I want to make sure that, you know, a lot of you in the audience right now, you don't have on a tie or sport coat or anything right now, but don't get it twisted. I'm you. You're me. Yeah. So the other thing I'll add is that in my role at the Bob Barker Foundation, what I've discovered is that the most impactful and the most effective intervention to keep people out of prison for the rest of their life is higher education, right? If you have any kind of dream or goal of seeking a higher education, go for it. I got my bachelor's in social work from Shaw University. I graduated in 2019. Y'all see all this gray? It doesn't matter. What God has for you is for you. All you got to do is just get up every day and go get it. But beyond higher education, because that can be quite expensive, especially if somebody's in prison, but beyond that, the next most effective intervention are all the interventions that I look at and I say, you know what? That's just like Oxford House. That concept reminds me so much of Oxford House because guess what? They're led by the participants. They're not governed by volunteers or anybody else. They're self-run and self-supported, just like we are. We tapped into something golden right here. Let's make sure that we stand on the shoulders of our predecessors, these giants that have come before us, and put all of this in place and do everything within our power to leave Oxford House better than it was when we got to it. Probably the only person on the panel without a criminal record, as far as we know. Ivory Wilson is the program manager at the Office of Behavioral Health in Louisiana Department of Health. He has worked exclusively in the behavioral health profession for 31 years. He is a program manager under the Louisiana Department of Health. He has worked exclusively in the behavioral health profession for 31 years and currently provides oversight and management to 24-hour residential treatment programs, residential treatment facilities, Oxford Recovery Homes. He's the project director for the COVID-19 Emergency SUD Grant, the Block Grant, Supplemental Grant, the American Rescue Plan Act funds, and other federally funded projects. He also serves on the Accountability and Improvement Plan Committee, which monitors programs that receive block grant funding. He is a member of the State of Louisiana Epidemiology Work Group, say that real fast, which studies statewide and national drug trends. He is the chair for the Office of Behavioral Health Subcommittee for the Louisiana Prison Reentry Initiative that assists with prison reform efforts in Louisiana. He's also the chair of the Office of Behavioral Health's Opioid Strategic Plan that helps combat the prescription opioid and heroin overdose epidemic. Help me welcome Ivory Wilson.
Thanks, Curtis. Good morning. Is it afternoon? As Curtis mentioned, I work with the Louisiana Department of Health, Office of Behavioral Health. And like my esteemed panelist cohorts, I don't have that same lived experience. I'm not as exciting. My stories are not going to be as sensational as theirs are. But I do have some personal experience with the Department of Corrections. Curtis mentioned that I may not have a criminal record, but I did have a criminal record at one time. I was a much younger person. Also, from a personal experience, I have a brother who's currently incarcerated doing life in a prison in Louisiana called Hunt Correctional Facility. He's been a long-time heroin user. I think he started using heroin probably when he was 16 years old. So now he's currently doing life because of some crimes associated with his drug use. On an even more personal level, I have a son, my oldest son. He's 34 years old. He thought he was Pablo Escobar, and so he went to the country of Colombia, and he attempted to transport over 8,000 opioid pills back into the United States. So he got incarcerated it was Mother's Day, the night before Mother's Day last year. He was on his way back to New Orleans, and he got caught in Fort Lauderdale. And for those 5 days that he was incarcerated, he was in Fort Lauderdale County Jail. It was probably the worst time of my life. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat. It was a pretty tumultuous time. So currently he's incarcerated at a halfway house. So he went to jail, got transferred to a halfway house, and he's doing the rest of his stay until I think January, and from there he'll be on house arrest. I have a personal experience with that, and so I've been a therapist, like Curtis mentioned, for like 31 years, and no one is void from having that relationship, or either no one is void from having those type of things happen to them. And so on a personal level, it really meant a lot to me to come here today and speak to you all about our relationship with Oxford House, but also with the Department of Corrections in the state of Louisiana. In Louisiana, we do a lot of things big. We got all the festivals, we got Mardi Gras, we got crawfish, we got the best food in the world. I don't care what nobody else says. We have the best food in the world. So anyway, but on a negative note, we incarcerate more people per capita than any country in the free world. The Department of Corrections and Public Safety, their budget currently is $725 million. That's almost $1 billion that's being spent on public safety and corrections. And so, and it's strange because the Department of Justice mentioned that less than 35% of the individuals who are incarcerated are there for violent crimes. But yet over 70% of those individuals are there because they committed a crime while they were under the influence of some type of illicit mood, art, and chemical substance. At the time they committed the crime, they got them incarcerated. Another 30-some% of those individuals have co-occurring disorders. They either had bipolar disorder, major depression, anxiety, or something, along with using drugs and alcohol at that same time. In Louisiana, again, we outdo everybody. In comparison to those national numbers, 84% of those individuals in our state are there because of alcohol and drug-related crimes, and another 44% of them are there because of co-occurring disorders. So our numbers exceed the national record. The budget in my office, I may not be 100% accurate on this, but at one point it was probably $350 million. So the Department of Corrections spends over $725 million incarcerating people and keeping the public safe, but yet the Office of Behavioral Health, who provides services to people with mental health and substance use disorders, budget is far less. Let's see, I think there's a slide. I'm not as talented as other panelists. I have to use a slide presentation, so okay. Okay, all right. All right, let's see. All right, so that's just an outline. For the sake of time, I won't go through all that about the goals and the objectives of our relationship with the Oxford House. So currently, I'll tell you what, I can't see that. I'm not as old as I look, but man, I can't see worth a crap. Let me see. 1 second. All right. Yeah, just pull up the slides. So yeah, we spend a lot of money in Louisiana on incarcerating people. And post-Katrina, there's less than 5 million people in the entire state, but yet we spend almost $1 billion on public safety and corrections. It's astronomical. So currently in Louisiana, we have 175 Oxford homes. We have 109 men's homes, 34 women's houses, 28 women and children's houses, 4 men and children's houses, which equates to 1,300 total beds, 1,305. 810 men's beds, 255 women's beds, 207 women with dependent children's beds, and 33 men with children's beds. And that's some data also about the number of residents that are living with an opiate use disorder, who are prescribed MAT, and also the abstinence rate, which I think is 93%. There is some reentry data that I picked up. So currently, Lori Holtzclaw, I don't know what Lori's title is. I think she's ascended now. I don't know if she's still National Director of Field Services. Thanks, Dan. So she's like a big timer. But Lori and I work together with the reentry program in the state of Louisiana. Because of the efforts of the current administration, we developed an initiative called the LaPrix Initiative. LaPrix is the Louisiana Prison Reentry Initiative. So we got together with the governor's office and the state agencies where I work, Louisiana Department of Health, the Department of Children and Family Services, Department of Education, Department of Labor, and Workforce. So in an effort to reduce the recidivism, but also try to decrease the prison incarceration rates, each one of these agencies got together, pooled their funds together, and we started addressing the issues that the prison systems were facing in Louisiana. And so my job is to go out to the reentry jails. There are 11 of them statewide. And so we provide presentations with the staff on services that are available for individuals once they return back to society. I kind of used this antiquated data back some time ago, and my brother Curtis here got me right a couple of years ago here in D.C. when we were at the other place for the convention. You know, we use those words, you know, prisoners, offenders, and all that antiquated language, which further demeans individuals. So thanks to him, I'm not using that language anymore. And so with these individuals who are returning to society, these are people that look like me, that look like you, that have to come back to society at some point, and they have to be integrated. And so we go out and we do those reentry presentations. Myself, Jeremy Witherspoon, partners with me as well. We hadn't gone, well, I think he's going back out, but I haven't been back out since COVID, but we're in the process of going back out to those reentry facilities and trying to get those individuals the necessary supports that they need once they return to society. So the data I received recently from NOAA indicated that we have 24 applicants that were admitted from institutions. 0 of those individuals have returned, and also 0 of those individuals have recidivated. So that is definitely worthy of applause. So the Office of Behavioral Health will receive several different funding sources that provide the support that we need in order to sustain the Oxford houses. About $249,000 of SAPT block grant funds, $503,000 of the SAPT COVID Reentry Recovery Grant, and the LASOA grant, which has been mentioned a lot here at the convention. Those funds are important because we use those funds to pay for stipends, monthly stipends for individuals that are returning back to society. And so if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if Jeremy is here, it may pay their rent stipend for like 3 months, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in that neighborhood until they're able to become gainfully employed. 1 month? My bad, we ought to increase it to 3 months. So 1 month it is. So that's my spiel. I'm up against time. So I think that our relationship with Oxford is important. I've been over the contract probably 12 years. I've been with the state 16 years. I can't even explain to you in words or describe how impactful those services are. You all provide a service that's immeasurable. I can't even put it into context, the impact that Oxford has on our state. We have 179 homes. We're hoping to open more each year. Let me see if there's anything else. That is my spiel. I appreciate you all having me here. I appreciate the time that you've given me. And thanks for your support with our state.
Thank you, Ivory.
Thank you.
Another round of applause for Mr. Ivory Wilson. We couldn't do any of the things that we do without our community partners and the support and funding from our local governments and what have you. So we appreciate you, Ivory. Want to thank everybody for hanging out with us for this session. Hope you got a lot out of this. Let's go back home and help people stay out of prison. Thank you.